everybody, and welcome back to the Rob Talks podcast. And this is episode 21. And for today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the topic of overthinking. Now, I know that overthinking is something that can be quite an annoying thing within our lives, and particularly when I've spoken to young people and a young generation, people my age as well and younger. Overthinking seems to be a common thing that happens quite a lot, mainly in relation to worrying about the future and also just anything that causes you to feel anxious or have some form of anxiety. And the first things first to note about overthinking is, what is overthinking? Because there is, in fact, some things that we perceive as overthinking, but they're not actually overthinking. And some thoughts that we have that are 100% overthinking and are not getting us anywhere. Essentially, to define overthinking, overthinking is when you have a repetitive and unproductive thought. So this is where you have a thought that's going around and around in your head and you can't stop thinking about it, but it's unproductive. Because sometimes there are situations where we have to overanalyze things. We have to look into things deeper, but the thoughts that we are having about them are actually productive and they are actually getting us somewhere. That's not overthinking. That's just overanalyzing. And so in some ways, that can be helpful. That can be helpful for when you're trying to do problem solving. That can be helpful for when you're trying to be really in depth with something. So for example, as a designer, I have to be really in depth into the end user that I'm giving a product to and thinking about, if I was in their shoes, what would they be feeling? What would they be thinking? What would they be doing? And that's where you really have to deeply overanalyze, and that's a situation of where you can sometimes feel like you're overthinking. But the truth is that you're just overanalyzing, because your thoughts in that case are actually productive. But in the case of overthinking, a lot of the time, and when I've experienced it in my own life, overthinking is related a lot to anxiety and to my mental well-being. And in terms of just overthinking a multitude of things. And so I wanted to break it down in terms of what we can be overthinking about. So for example, it's easy to overthink about the past. It's easy to look at past times of where we've been embarrassed, or past times of where we have regrets or things that have gone wrong, and you overthink about how you maybe could have dealt with the situation better, or that you could have not embarrassed yourself or been able to change that way that memory has been formed in your head. But the truth with the past is, of course, that we can't control it. The past is the past, and you live very much in the present and the now. And so a lot of our overthinking that is held in past memories, we can't do much. Well, we have to understand that we can't do much about the memory. If you are likely to have connotations to a certain memory, yes, you can try and use perspective and use your mind to shift your mindset around what you think to that memory. But at the end of the day, that memory will always exist, or it will always exist as long as you think about it. And so overthinking can happen with our past. But I do think, in fact, that overthinking happens more within our present and even within our future. So within our present, overthinking looks a lot like how we're overthinking about current relationships, how we're overthinking about current situations that are happening right now. So for me, in the past, I have overthought about many things. So many things, particularly in relationships. And that's relationships that are both romantic and even within my family or within friends. I have done so much overthinking previously that I could have probably written a book about it, because my thoughts would just go around and around and around and around. And so much of it used to be related to, am I being caring enough? Am I being loving enough to somebody? So much of the thoughts were that I felt as though that I didn't always show love in the best way, because for me personally, and depends where you sit with love languages and things like that, I'm always somebody that I really love to show my love in a giving way. I'm a designer, I'm a creative, I love making things, I love doing things and giving things to people. I'm not as particularly good at doing it vocally, oddly enough. Even though I do public speaking, I have a YouTube channel like this, I'm not so good at saying the words, I love you. And so I used to overthink about that so much, and whether the person loved me back, whoever it may have been. And it was tough. And when you are so much in your present day, the issue that I always have with situations that happen in your present day and happen for me is the fact that because they're in the present, they really take a burden on you, but then you've got to get on with the rest of your day. You've got to be productive. You have to get on with your life whilst also having this relentless thoughts going around in your head. And that's where I really think that overthinking could be quite toxic. And so we have to find ways of how we can deal with it. I will talk about that more in depth later on. But overthinking the present, I would say for me personally, is also understandable. And it has happened to me so much that I'm so happy the kind of journey I've taken personally with my mental health and looking after my mental well-being within the past few years, because easily from the time of when I had cancer, my feeling of anxiety was so high, especially when I was at university and just starting off at university, that because of my high anxiety, it then made everything else even higher. So it meant that my perspective of things made me overthink more. And that's why we have to be able to also understand within the framing of this that a lot of the time overthinking is related to anxiety, or when you are feeling anxious. So not, it doesn't have to be specifically that you have an anxiety disorder. It can be just that you're feeling anxious, or the fact that you're feeling depressed or you have depression. And so these are two key elements that can lead towards overthinking. And so when I was in a space of where I just felt anxious every single day, and it wasn't great, I'll be honest, it made me overthink everything. And that was even down to the simplest of things of how much sleep I was getting, what I was eating, what I was doing with my day to day. It got to a point of where you start to blend these two things of overthinking and self-talk. And the self-talk starts to become negative. It starts to eat away at you because you're overthinking. So I would overthink about something as simple as my coursework, or the fact that because of chemotherapy, I was low on energy and so I was sleeping a lot. And so I would then overthink about that massively. And my self-talk would be jabbing at me saying that you're useless, you're unproductive, you're not doing this. And that just sends you even more down a spiral of not doing the work, not doing the coursework, not being productive, and just struggling with my mental well-being. And so there are you have to understand that there are multiple ways to look at this. We can attack the overthinking and try and change that, but sometimes it's more of a case that we have to attack something that is more deep rooted in why are we feeling anxious? Why are we feeling depressed at this time? Why are we feeling this way that is then leading to us overthinking and thinking so much about repetitive and unproductive thoughts? There is also overthinking that is to do with the future. And I think this is a particular type of overthinking that everybody can relate to, because we worry a lot naturally as humans about the future. It's part of our safety mechanism. We're worried about what's going to come around that next corner. It's all in our survival instincts and trying to keep ourselves safe. And so we're always worried about, what if this happens? What if my career goes down the drain and I'm homeless? What if I don't get that dream job? What if I don't get that dream girlfriend or wife or partner or whoever you want it to be? What if I lost everything today and I have to rebuild my life? Or what if I was diagnosed with cancer tomorrow and I have to deal with that? There are so many things that are major things that can happen in our lives that we don't know about them possibly happening, and also the probability of them in a lot of cases is so unlikely, but we can still perpetuate within our minds that the chance of me being diagnosed with a deadly disease is so high tomorrow, or the fact that if I eat just a bit too much chocolate tomorrow that I'm going to become obese and not physically fit, or that I'm never going to find somebody that truly loves me. There are so many things that we worry about and we turn into these big situations that can come from overthinking. And that's why there's this element of the fact that they are unproductive thoughts is so important to consider, because it's the factor of that these thoughts aren't getting you anywhere. Because when I was overthinking so much, I was overthinking so much in my first year of university. So much of why I was overthinking was because I was asking this question repeatedly of what if? What if X happens? It used to happen a lot with trains, and I've done a video on to do with called Do You Ever Feel Like This, of when I used to feel really anxious about traveling on trains. And it's because there was an element of overthinking. I used to ask, what if the train just doesn't turn up? What if the train decides to turn up late and then I have to get on another train? Or what if I have to stay in a hotel somewhere because I couldn't get to where I wanted to get to? Or what if I fall on the tracks and like I get in the way of the train? Or what if I get on the wrong train? There was so many scenarios going through my head and so many unproductive thoughts that were just getting me nowhere. And that's why I think there's an element within overthinking that is so much to do with our mindset and our perspective. Because I remember when speaking to my therapist more about how I was feeling anxious at the time, a lot of it came down to my perspective. And a lot of it came down to that I would ask the question of what if this could happen? And would start to reply with, so what? I would reply with "so what" in my self-talk. It's a really simple thing, but it made such a massive difference, because it was something as simple as, what if I miss my train? So what? You can get another train. You can stay over at a hotel. You can get a bus. You can call a friend to help you. You can do so many different things to deal with the problem that you're overthinking about and you're worrying about so much. There was always ways to find a solution. And I live by that mindset today, and I live by that perspective today, by the fact that I feel that no matter what problem happens in the world, there is always a solution. Even in the times where it feels like there is no solution, there is always a way out. There is always a solution to deal with the problem. But with overthinking, I've noted down some things that really help me to stop myself from overthinking. And honestly, I feel if you imply these, and particularly the mindset part of it and the perspective part of it, you will never overthink again. Or if you do, you will be able to deal with it in a couple of seconds, because that is genuinely my life right now. And I'm so happy that I'm at this point now of where if I do overthink, I know within minutes that I can deal with that. If it's through, for example, my first solution of relaxing, allowing to find yourself a way to just relax. Because when we're anxious and when we're overthinking, we get uptight, our shoulders can go up, we don't realize it, our chest goes up, our breathing changes, we change physically, and we don't relax and just change the pace that everything is going at. Because your brain may be going at 1,000,000 miles per hour, but you have to slow down. You have to take an opportunity to just relax and let you be in the present moment and that time, and know that you are okay, you are alive, and that you can be in a mindset to deal with this problem, this thought. whatever it may be. The second solution is focusing upon mindfulness, because mindfulness is such a helpful tool, and it is very much something that is more for the long term. But mindfulness can help you so much to be in the present, but also to be more mindful of your thoughts. As mindfulness kind of hints at, it's a lot to do with how you're thinking about things and how you're feeling about things. And there's an element to mindfulness that really helps you to deal with your thoughts. And I remember, and I still do it now, of going through multiple headspace mindfulness sessions, and it helps you to understand of how thoughts can drift away and they can come back, and you can either attack them or you can leave them, or you can just try and blank your mind, or you can really concentrate on them. There are so many different ways that mindfulness can help you to deal with the thoughts that you are having and the self-talk that you are perpetuating within yourself, and even potentially your overthinking. There is also, as I've said, this huge element of perspective. Now, to make perspective into more of a graphical element, or maybe more of a visual image so you can see what I'm saying, I love to think about it, and I think I have said this before, but I love to think about my perspective on life as though I am in a box. That Robert McKenna is in this box, and he is trapped in this box, but this box is his world. He is in this world and experiencing the world, doing all the things, but also within this box are the thoughts, are the self-talk, is the negativity and the positivity, but so many things that are going around in Rob's head are trapped in this box. So my way of finding perspective is to take a moment to just stop and get out of the box. Quite literally, lift up the lid, get out the box, and then look at Rob that is still in the box and his world and everything that is going on right now. And I am not even kidding. I used to do that when I was really badly overthinking. To deal with it, I used to say that out loud. I say, Rob, stop. Get your head out of the box and think about it. And in doing that, it made me then realize why I was feeling that way, why I was feeling anxious, and why I was having this thought, and how I was overanalyzing, or how I was going over the top in my thinking about it, and that overall the thought was unproductive. And I know that if I can do that, you 100% can do that too. And one of my last solutions is all to do with journaling and having a problem-solving mindset. So journaling, and we'll even include talking within this, is a great way to just unearth what you're thinking about. So many times my overthinking was at its worst when I was alone, because it's hard when you're alone if you don't have an output to be able to let go of the thought. It just keeps going around and around and around, and it really burdens your mind. And so journaling was a great way for me to just write down, right, this is what I'm thinking, this is the problem I'm trying to deal with. And even talking to others about, I'm having this thought and I'm really struggling to know whether it's like me or whether it's like this problem, this person, this thing in my life, whatever it may be. And so by talking with somebody else, it can just help you to process it, and they will probably be able to be the person that can be outside the box looking at you inside your little world and go, Rob, you could just do this. Or, Rob, I understand. It's okay. I've had the similar thought before. I've been in a similar place before. There's so many ways that you can deal with it. But I think there is also an element of problem solving needed within this. Now, it doesn't work with every context of overthinking. But so much of our overthinking, as I said, with the what if question and the so what answer, is to do with problem solving. It's the problem that we have in our life that we then need to find a solution to help us to get out of that problem. And so that's what it would be for me when it was overthinking to do with traveling on trains, when it was to do with relationships, when it was to do with coursework, when it was to do with my sleeping pattern, my eating habits, my physical exercise, my manners, my speech, whatever it may be that I was overthinking about. I knew that I had to have a problem-solving mindset and work out, how can I deal with the thoughts and the problem? And is there a solution that I can do today that can help me to feel better? And before we end this episode, I hope this episode has been so valuable to any of you listening. There was one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is actually from the animal kingdom. And this is the fact about zebras. So the interesting thing that I found out about humans and zebras is the fact that as humans, a lot of the time, our lives don't actually need to be that stressful. We don't actually need to worry about things that much, and we don't need to overthink that much. But still, we do, because we have to deal with chronic stress so much more than a zebra does, which for me sounds insane. Because when you think of a life of a zebra, the life of a zebra, simplified, is that they eat, move, sleep, and run away from lions or predators or whoever they may be, and they do it all over again. And the only time that it turns out that they have major stress that can be linked to the kind of stress that we face in our world, chronic stress, is when they're running away from a lion. The rest of their lives, the rest of their days, they live in the present. They deal with the present. And I suspect that is the difference between human minds and minds within the animal kingdom. Because our minds are so amazing and we can think about all these different things and make all these different things and do all these different things, we consequently have to deal with the flip side of that, in the fact that we can have a lot of stress within our lives, or a lot of perceived stress and worry, which can be through overthinking. And so, if any of you are overthinking right now, and maybe you're even watching this because you're having a thought that is just going around and around and around, go through the solutions that I've spoken about, because it won't always at first be a second that changes it, or a minute or an hour. It sometimes takes a lot of time. And I know from my own experiences of some of the worst times I've ever overthought, it's taken days and even in some cases weeks and months. But that's okay, because the ultimate answer to all of this is that there is a solution. There are multiple solutions that you can try, and you can stop yourself from overthinking ever again. You have been listening to the Rob Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you for next week, for next week's video on the Rob Talks YouTube channel and Spotify. See you next week. You have just been listening to the Rob Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please make sure to subscribe and give me a follow on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, or even LinkedIn. And I will speak with you soon. Stay safe and have a great week.